my CDL pre-trip inspection. For that, I'm gonna check my ID lights properly working with no loose, missing screws, bands, cracks, and no missing bulbs, amber in color. My windshield properly mounted. My windshield rubber properly mounted, no cracks, no tears. My windshield's clean, no cracks. My wiper arms work smoothly and secure. My lights, I have my low beams, high beams, four-way flasher, signal lights, and my courtesy lights. Amber and clear in color on both sides. My bumper, properly working, properly mounted, no loose or missing any screws, no illegal welds, no bends, cracks, and no extra holes. My license plate, properly mounted, current registration, and clean. No extra holes, and no loose or missing any screws. Now under the truck, with no leaks of any kind, oil or water. Now we're gonna move on to my right side, where I'm checking for my signal light. No bends, cracks, and there's no missing bolts. Amber in color. My hood latch guard, properly working, no loose or missing any screws, no missing components or no cracks. I'm gonna open this side, and I'm gonna proceed to the other side. My signal light on my right side, properly mounted, no cracks, no loose or missing any screws, no missing bolts. My hood latch guard, properly mounted, no loose or missing any screws or bolts, no cracks, and no missing any components. I'm gonna open the hood. I'm gonna put my knee on the bumper, both hands. I'm gonna pull. We're gonna start on our right side with my filter. Filter's clean, properly mounted, no cracks or any tears on my housing. My radiator properly mounted, no loose, missing any bolts. Hoses have no cuts or leaks. My serpentine belt, no loose, no cracks, no excessive wear. Shouldn't have more than 3/4 of play at center of the belt when pulled by hand. And runs two components, my alternator and my water pump. Alternator properly working, properly mounted, no loose, missing, or any cracks or any bolts. Wires are secure. My water pump properly working, no loose or missing any bolts, properly mounted. Hoses have no cuts or leaks. Now my turbo properly mounted, no loose or missing any bolts, no cracks, no illegal welds. Hoses have no cuts or leaks. Now we're gonna move on to the bottom of my truck where I have my oil filter. Oil filter tight with no leaks. Now we're gonna move on to my left side. Here I have my air compressor and my water pump, my power steering fluid pump. They are both gear driven. My air compressor properly mounted, no loose or missing any bolts, no cracks or leaks. My hoses have no cuts or leaks. My power steering pump properly mounted, no loose or missing any bolts, no cracks. Hoses have no cuts or leaks. My oil filler and disc stick properly mounted, no loose or missing any bolts, no cracks, no bends or no leaks. Cap tight, oil level above refill mark. Power steering fluid reservoir, no bends, cracks, or illegal welds. Level checked. Cap tight. Hoses have no cuts or leaks. My coolant reservoir, cap tight, no bends, cracks, or properly mounted. Level check. Hoses have no cuts or leaks. My steering rod properly working, properly mounted, no loose, missing any bolts, no illegal welds, properly greased. Couplings properly greased, properly mounted, with no loose or missing any components. My steering box properly mounted, no loose or missing any bolts. Hoses have no cuts or leaks. My mounting and mounting bolts properly mounted, no loose or missing any bolts or any cracks or illegal welds. My leaf springs properly mounted, no loose or missing any leaf springs, no illegal welds, and no cracks, bends, My U-bolts properly mounted, no loose, missing any bolts, no cuts, no cracks, no bends. My shock absorber properly mounted, no cracks, no bends, and no leaks. I have 3 components here. I have my linkage, steering linkage, rod, and arm properly mounted, no loose or missing any bolts or cutter pins, and they're not with any illegal welds. My tie rod and arm properly mounted, no loose, missing any bends or cracks or illegal welds, and no missing cotter pins. Now my steering tire and axle. Now I have my brake adjuster, no bends, cracks, or illegal welds, and no missing pins, and no more than 1 inch when pulled by hand of play. My brake chamber properly mounted, no loose, missing, or any bends, cracks, or illegal welds. Hoses have no cuts or leaks. In here I have my rim. I have my brake drum and my brake lining. No bends, cracks, or illegal welds on my brake drum. On my brake lining, no bends, cracks, or illegal welds, and not worn dangerously thin or less than 1/4 of an inch. No oil or any grease of any kind. My steering tire tread depth, it's no less than 4/32 of an inch. The side of the tire, no nails, no leaks, and no cuts. My rim properly mounted, no bends, cracks, or illegal welds. My U-bolts properly mounted, no bends, cracks, or rust around my U-bolts. My hub oil seal level check, no bends, cracks, no leaks, no loose or missing any bolts. My splash guards properly mounted, no loose, missing, or any tears or cracks. It should always be 8 inches away from the tire and 4 inches from the ground up, not rubbing on the tire. My door brackets properly mounted, no loose, missing any bolts, no illegal welds, and no cracks. Now I'm gonna close my hood. 2 hands. Close my right side. Close your left side. Brackets, bends, cracks, welds properly mounted with no loose or missing any bolts, no missing components. My mirrors adjusted to me, no bends or no cracks, and not broken, and always clean. My door latch, my lock, working properly, opens and closes from the inside and out. My windows roll down and up easily. Here I have my fire extinguisher, ready to use, fully charged with pins still intact, properly mounted, no loose or missing any bolts in the mounting. And under my passenger seat, I have my 3 reflector triangles, and I also have a toolbox with fuses and any belts and hoses. Driver handle properly mounted, no loose, missing, or any illegal welds, working properly. My driver steps working properly with no loose or missing any bolts, no cracks, illegal welds on both of them. My straps are secure with no missing any bolts or screws, no bends, cracks, or illegal welds on my straps. My tank properly mounted, no bends, cracks, leaks, and no illegal welds, cap tight. I have my 3 wires. I have my emergency, my service, and my electrical, with no cracks, no leaks, and properly mounted to my glad hands with no leaks on my emergency, on my service, and my electricals properly connected to my electrical box. My wires are not rubbing any part of the frame and the exhaust. My battery box and cover properly mounted with no loose bends, cracks, or illegal welds on my mountings. Under the cap, I have my cell caps are present, level check. Connections are tight with no corrosions, working properly. My air tanks properly mounted with no loose or missing any bolts on my U-bolts here, with no bends or cracks or illegal welds, and no leaks on all of my hoses, working properly. I have my drive shaft properly working, no bends, cracks or illegal welds. My couplings, no bends, cracks or illegal welds, and properly greased, working properly. My air dryer properly mounted, no loose, no bends, no cracks or illegal welds. My hoses and wires are properly mounted with no cuts or leaks. My exhaust system properly mounted with the straps with no bends, cracks or illegal welds, properly mounted to the frame with no carbon soup. Now I'm going to check for my fifth wheel structure, properly welded to the frame with no bends, cracks or any illegal welds. My release arm always in the engaged position with no bends, cracks or illegal welds. My fifth wheel structure and my trailer frame on top with no gaps. My fifth wheel pins working properly with no bends, cracks or illegal welds. Now let me transition from my steering axle to my drive axle, as I'll be checking for the same differences and same mistakes on my steering and drive axle. I'm going to be checking for my leaf springs, my mount, my brake chamber, my hoses, my brake adjuster, my brake drum, my brake lining, my rim, my lug nuts, and I'll be checking for my splash guards. Now let me explain the difference from my steering axle to my torque bar properly mounted with no loose or missing any screws or bolts, no illegal welds, properly greased. I have my brake rod, no bends, cracks or illegal welds, and properly greased. My space between the tires should not be more than 4 inches, with no debris or any trash or debris in between. My thread depth for my tires on the drive axle should be no less than 2/32 of an inch. My other difference is my hub seal, my axle seal, properly greased, no bends, cracks or illegal welds, and no rust around my lug nuts. I'll go under the trunk. I'll be checking for my kingpin properly mounted, no loose bends, cracks or illegal welds. My locking jaw always fully closed around my pin with no bends, cracks or illegal welds. My aprons properly working, no bends, cracks or illegal welds. My tongue drop bar not twisted, no bends, cracks or illegal welds. Now here I have my lights, my reverse, clear in color, my parking, my four-way flashers, my signal, and my brake, red in color, properly mounted, no bends, cracks or illegal welds on my mounting. My wires are secure on both of them, not frayed or no loose. Now my license plate properly mounted, no loose or missing any bolts, no extra holes. My landing gear structure, crossbar and landing gear properly mounted with no loose bends, cracks or illegal welds on my structure. My landing gear goes up and down smoothly with no bends, cracks or any illegal welds. On this side of my trailer, on the right side, I have my crank handle. My crank handle not missing any bolts, cracks or illegal welds, and properly greased. This side I have one of my running lights, amber in color in front, with no bends, cracks or illegal welds around my my light, and no missing bulbs. My strap tie down is properly working, no bends, cracks or illegal welds. My hooks properly working with no bends, cracks, or illegal welds properly attached to the frame. My frame and cross members properly mounted to my trailer with no bends, cracks, or illegal welds. My cross boards for my flatbed properly working with no bends, cracks, and no holes. My side reflective tape properly working, clean and visible. Now let me transition from my drive axle to my rear axle, as I will be checking for the same differences and same mistakes on both. Now let me check for the same mistakes on my space between the tires, my tires thread depth, my brake chamber, brake rod, brake drum, brake lining, brake adjuster, leaf springs, my air tanks, my U-bolts, my side of the tire, my rim, my lug nuts, and my splash guards. Now let me explain the difference. My difference is my mounting and mounting crossbar with no bends, cracks, or illegal welds, properly mounted, no loose or missing any bolts, properly welded to the frame. My crossbar, no bends, cracks, or illegal welds, properly mounted to my mount. My other difference is on the rear axle, I have a hub oil seal, level check, no bends, cracks, or illegal welds on the mounting, and no rust around my bolts, with no loose or missing any bolts, and level check. Now let me move on to the back of the trailer, where I have a red running light that indicates that's my back with no loose, missing any bulbs or screws, properly mounted to the frame. Now on the back I have my running lights, I have my brake lights, my signal lights, and my four-way flashers properly working, red in color on both sides. My running lights are red in color with no bends, no cracks, and no missing bulbs, and red in color. Now I have two glad hands, my emergency and my service. They're properly working, no loose or missing any bolts, and no leaks. My trailer is not leaning to either side, it's at balance. My hitch is working properly, no bends, cracks, or illegal welds, no loose or missing any bolts, working properly. Now let me transition from my left side of the trailer to the right side of the trailer, where I'm going to be checking for all the differences and all the mistakes on my rear axle, my drive axle, and my steering axle. I'll be checking for all my lights and all my hoses, and this concludes my CDL Class A pre-trip inspection.